Today is the 27th of January, 2010. We are at the terrace at Beaverwick in Slingerlands, New York. My name is Wayne Clarke. I'm with the New York State Military Museum and Veterans Research Center in Saratoga Springs, New York. Sir, for the Sir, for the record, would you please state your full name and your date and place of birth, please?
Everett Harry McCarty, May 16th, 1923, born in Climax, New York.
Did you attend school there?
Yes, I went to a one-room school for 3 years and then transferred to a village school in Coxsackie, New York, from which I graduated in 1939.
Mm-hmm. At that point, did you go to work or did you go on to college?
No, I went on to college, Union College in Schenectady, New York.
And what did you study at Union?
Well, I took preparation for teaching,
Mm-hmm.
although I was not entirely sure of what path I would follow. And I graduated from Union in 1943 and joined the enlisted reserve corps in 1942 because they agreed that I could finish, since I was a senior, I could finish the college year and then be called up.
Okay. Now, let me just go back a little bit. Do you recall where you were and what your reaction was when you heard about the attack on Pearl Harbor?
Yes, I think most people do. I had gone home with a cousin of my parents who lived in Scotia, New York, and I traveled back home with them that day, and as we were leaving, the radio gave us the message that Pearl Harbor had been attacked, and at that time we certainly had not ever heard of Pearl Harbor, but we knew Hawaii, of course. And our reaction was great surprise and chagrin because so many people had been killed and so many of our planes and ships and had been damaged, but at that moment we didn't know what the full story would be.
Mm-hmm. Did your life change at that point?
Yes, definitely, because at college we were concerned, Union was at that time an all-male college, and some of the fellows were interested immediately in enlisting, and we were given the opportunity to get more details and so on. The next day, when we had a meeting in our chapel in which the president of the college addressed us and asked us to be calm and not and just wait for the upcoming events.
Did you notice any type of shortages as far as food went or rationing?
Not immediately, but eventually, of course, we did have shortages. I worked as a waiter and finally as head waiter in the college dining room.
Mm-hmm.
And we noticed, of course, a great deal of activity because the V-12 Navy folks came and trained at Union,
Mm-hmm.
and so that was our connection immediately.
Okay. Did you have an automobile?
No.
Okay. All right. And what about clothing or shoes? Did you have a problem getting those at that point?
No, I wouldn't
Okay.
say that we did.
All right. And when you went on active duty, you were You were already signed up.
Right.
And did you consider officer candidate school at that point?
No, it was not in my thoughts at all. I just
Being that you were a college graduate, though, was that offered to you at all?
no.
Okay. So you went in as a private,
That's right.
and where did you go for your basic training?
Camp Wheeler, Georgia. That's where we trained.
Mm-hmm. And was that an infantry basic training?
Yes, that was infantry.
Mm-hmm. All right. And was that your first time away from home for an extended period of time?
Yes.
Okay. And once you completed your basic training, where did you go next?
The Army offered a program called ASTP, Army Specialization Corps, and I was fortunate enough to be selected because I had applied in our unit had a bulletin board, and on that board there was a notice that one could apply for this special training. It was supposed to be for military government,
Mm-hmm.
and we left camp well, we went to Florida for a brief time.
Okay.
And then we eventually, just before Christmas in 1943, we were shipped to Madison, Wisconsin, the University of Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we trained for 3 months for military government.
Okay.
They indicated that we would become second lieutenants and so forth. But at the end of those 3 months, it was decided by the Army that those candidates were no longer necessary for military government. So they gave us a PFC stripe and shipped us to the excuse me, to the the military police.
Oh, military police. Okay.
In Fort Custer, Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
And we were there for several days, maybe a week, as I recall. And then we received word that we were going to move on to Camp McCoy, Wisconsin, and train there as an engineer combat battalion.
Mm-hmm. Now, most of the people that you were with, had you trained with them before, or was this a whole new group of people to you?
This was, for the most part, new group. There were 3 or 4 fellows who had trained, I had trained with, but the remainder of the group were, half of the unit was composed of college graduates, and so, as I say, there were 2 or 3 friends that I had made in college who were there. The remainder of the battalion was made up of fellows from the South, from Alabama, Tennessee. In fact, some of them could not even write and or read, so it was a very different organization, but we got along very well in our training. So we trained as engineers, building bridges, picking up mines, making sure that the roads were in good shape and that sort of thing.
Did you train with demolitions at all?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And minefields, picking up mines and that sort of thing.
How long did that training last for?
That was three months. And then we were ready to go overseas.
Do you think your training was adequate to go overseas?
Well, I think so, because we had already had, most of us had training, as I said, in the infantry.
Mm-hmm.
And so that portion of training was added to what we learned in the Camp McCoy routine.
Okay. So,
Excuse me.
so then you went overseas as a unit,
Yes,
and that was the 1263rd Combat Engineer Battalion?
right.
And whereabouts did you leave from?
We left from Camp Shanks in Long Island.
Do you recall the name of the ship you went over on?
Yes, it was the Excelsior. I remember because that is the name of New York State,
Mm-hmm.
or slogan, New York State. And we had a very fast journey. I think it took us 10 days to reach England.
Were you a single ship or convoy?
No, we had a convoy,
Mm-hmm.
a number of destroyers and so forth.
Did you get sick at all on the?
And not, I personally didn't, but many others did,
Mm-hmm.
because we were in rather crowded conditions and located right near the kitchen, which gave us all kinds of odors, and plus the movement of the ship. And then
Mm-hmm.
some fellows spent a lot of time at the rail.
How was the food on the ship?
Well, it was passable, but not terribly different.
Mm-hmm.
Just army rations for the most part.
Okay. And what was the time frame for that when you went across to Europe? Do you recall the date?
Yes, we landed in Southampton, England, October 31st, 1943.
Okay. And what was your life like in England?
I personally was a company clerk and did not have to meet all of the KP and other duties,
Mm-hmm.
because I was in headquarters typing payrolls and doing
Mm-hmm.
clerical work.
Did you have a background in typing? Had you taken that in
Yes.
school? Okay. And how long were you in England for?
We left for the continent in February of 1946.
Uh,
And
well, it wasn't 46.
or 45, I'm sorry,
Okay.
1945.
Okay. So you were in England for quite a while then.
Yes, we were training, continuing to train
Mm-hmm.
on bridge building and that sort of thing. And
So you went to France in February of 45.
for February of 45.
Okay.
We expected to be called even sooner, because the Battle of the Bulge had
Mhm.
occurred, and they were taking troops of all units and so forth to resupply, and we missed that.
Mm-hmm. What about your clothing and equipment? Did you feel it was adequate, especially under the weather conditions at that point?
I would say so.
Mm-hmm. All right. And what were your living conditions like once you went to France? Were you living in tents?
Well, our unit, being an engineer combat battalion, we traveled from place to place very quickly, and usually we were able to have accommodations in a warehouse or a barn or some structure of that nature, although sometimes we did use tents. But it was very muddy, a very wet season, and we landed in France, but then we traveled through Belgium to Holland, and each time that we moved, we'd be assigned different duties, road building or repair, bridge building and so forth, so we didn't stay in one spot for very long.
Now, were you still a company clerk?
Yes.
And did your unit have any combat?
Yes, we had a limited amount, I would say. We were close to the Ruhr pocket in Germany, and there were reported to be about 75,000 German soldiers there who were surrounded, and we heard the cannon fire for several days, and then we were moved out of the area, so we didn't really participate. We were at the edge of the combat, I would say.
Was your unit ever strafed by enemy aircraft at all?
Yes, a few times, but we were fortunate no one was harmed. The Luftwaffe was being pretty well contained at that point, and they had lost so many planes and pilots, I guess, that they weren't really a danger to us anyway.
Do you recall where you were when you heard about the death of President Roosevelt?
Not exactly. I know we were very surprised and saddened by his death, but I don't recall exactly where I was.
All right, and let's see, that was in April of '45.
April '45.
And the war in Europe ended in May.
May.
And do you recall where you were when the war in Europe ended?
Yes, we were near the Elbe River. In fact, we were the first unit to meet any Russian troops who were coming from the other direction. And that was very, really a dangerous spot for us because we were a small unit, and the German troops who had been in Denmark were retreating southward, and for days the roads were so crowded we didn't have any supplies to spare. In fact, we were even forced to shoot deer or farm animals and so forth from nearby farms. We would purchase them, and we were really isolated at that point.
Did your unit have any Germans surrender to it?
No, not that I recall. We were just on the move, it seemed, and
did you have any direct contact with the Russians?
yes, we did, very briefly, and
How did that go?
they seemed to be very excited, of course, to see Americans, and many of them could speak a little English, not very much, and we didn't fraternize a great deal. And then the war ended, and we moved in a different direction to stay in the occupation.
Was there a lot of celebration when the war ended?
Yes, I would say so, but we were again out on the countryside, and more of the celebration, I think, occurred in
Mm-hmm.
cities and towns.
Mm-hmm. So was your unit part of the occupation force?
Yes, we were in occupation until I was discharged, or until I got back to the United States.
Okay. Was there any talk about maybe going to the Pacific at all?
Yes, yes, we were quite aware of the fact that things were not ended in that theater of operations, and there was a point system,
Mm-hmm.
which was a point for each year of service in the Army or whatever else, and 2 points for each year, each month that you were overseas.
Uh-huh.
So those who'd been in the service the longest went home first.
Mm-hmm. I see here that you weren't discharged till April of 1946.
Right,
So you were overseas all that time
right.
as part of the occupation.
And I was fortunate enough to again be able to go to school, because there was a notice that students were welcome at the University of Edinburgh if they met certain standards, which
Mhm.
apparently I did, because I spent 3 months there and
What did you study there?
studied economics and English
Mm-hmm.
literature. And since I was prepared to be a teacher, I really enjoyed the experience.
Mm-hmm.
And
Did you get any college credits or a certificate for that program?
no, I did not.
Okay. All right. While you were overseas, did you see any USO shows or any forms of
Yes,
entertainment?
once we had a show in which Bob Hope and Jerry Colonna participated, and I've forgotten who the female group was, but it was very enjoyable.
Mm-hmm. And did you get to visit any of the cities over in Europe, like Paris or Berlin or?
Well, I flew from wherever our unit was at the time to Paris on my way to the University of Edinburgh.
Mm-hmm.
But it was just an overnight, so I did see a little bit of Paris, but like the L'Arc de Triomphe and the Eiffel Tower and so on, but
Mm-hmm.
it was minimum.
Okay. And you went back home in 1946. What rank were you? You mentioned you were a sergeant.
Yeah, I was a sergeant, right.
Okay. And what about your trip back across to the United States? What was it, by ship?
Yes, and that was a very peaceful voyage and
Mm-hmm.
no problems.
Okay. And whereabouts were you discharged from?
From, let's see,
Did you land in New York?
yes,
Okay.
it was Camp Shanks again, as I recall.
Okay. I know a lot of the troops were discharged at Camp Dix at the time, but Shanks you were discharged from, and then you went home.
Right,
And how did you go home? By train or?
by train, right.
All right. Once you got home, I know you were a college graduate, but did you make use of the GI Bill?
Yes, I did. I managed to get my master's degree, but while I was teaching, I did that, and that was very convenient to have that help.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Did you make use of the what they call the 5220 Club at all?
No,
Okay. And did you use the GI Bill to buy a home?
yes,
Okay. And you mentioned to me earlier off camera that you had ended up joining the National Guard.
right.
And do you want to tell us about that?
Well, it was since, pardon me, we had field training once a week, and this was a medical corps, and
Whereabouts was that unit?
that was in Catskill, New York,
Okay.
and we had summer training also, a 2-week period at
Camp Drum?
Camp Drum, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was interesting, but when the Korean War began, they were calling up some troops, and we thought we were going to be sent to Korea, but it occurred that I could no longer go to the summer training because the school would not allow it. So I applied and was discharged as a first lieutenant.
Okay. Now, to become a first lieutenant or second lieutenant, did you have to go through officer candidate school?
A correspondence school,
Okay.
which was very interesting.
All right. And so you were discharged as a first lieutenant.
Well, I was discharged from the National Guard, yes.
Okay. All right. And you continued on with a teaching career?
Yes, I did.
And you taught in Catskill?
Catskill.
And what grades or subjects did you teach?
I taught English, and then after several years I was vice principal of the school.
Was that the high school?
The high school.
Mm-hmm.
And finally I was a guidance counselor in the junior high school. And could I mention a couple of things
Sure.
in regard to what I saw and experienced? I would like to put it on the record that I saw the remains of an atrocity in Gardelegen, Germany, where over 1,000 people who had been working for the Nazis were burned alive, and their bodies were still smoldering, and the odor was very, very pronounced.
Now, you have a photo of that. Do you want to show that to us?
Yes,
And I can zoom in on it.
sure.
Now, was there a factory there that they worked in, or were they late?
Yes, a
Okay.
factory.
Okay, if you hold that right up in front of you, I can zoom right in on it. And okay, and the top photo is where they were buried, and you mentioned that they rounded up the townspeople
Right.
to dig the graves.
Each person was responsible for
Okay,
the grave.
okay. And how did your unit happen upon that? Whereabouts were?
Well, we were traveling back to, or down to Munich,
Mhm.
a change of station. And the paratroopers had liberated this area just a couple of days before, and so
Mhm.
these bodies were still not prepared for burial or anything. They were just lying there,
Mm-hmm.
and the stench was terrific.
Mm-hmm.
I also was able to see the remains of the camp at Dachau near Munich, Germany. And that was an assembly line for murder.
Mm-hmm.
The people were brought in boxcars by train and herded into an area which they were told would give them a shower. In fact, there were fake shower heads installed overhead, and after they had the people remove their clothing and so on, they turned on the gas and gassed them. And according to some of the remnants there of guards and so on, we found out that they had a butcher's block right near the exit from the gas chamber, and they checked the bodies after they were gassed for any gold in their teeth or whatnot, and then they cremated them. There were several ovens there.
Mm.
A very, very sad situation
Mm-hmm.
to see how a man can turn to that inhumane treatment. The Lord only knows.
Mm-hmm. Any other incidents you'd like to mention that you can think of?
Well, in my mind, the experience of going to London on pass while we were in England for a couple of times was interesting because I saw the terrific amount of damage that had been done by the Luftwaffe,
Mm-hmm.
and I was able to go to Westminster Abbey and St. Paul's Cathedral and see they were badly damaged, but they did not receive any direct hits. And
Mm-hmm.
The same was true in Germany. I was able to climb up in the remnants of the Cologne Cathedral, which was damaged but never received a direct hit.
Mm-hmm.
And that was very interesting to see what had occurred. Also in England, we had, when we were at London, the buzz bombs that were called, perfected by Germany to go unguided through the air with a load of explosives, and these would travel around along until it ran out of fuel, and then it would drop and the explosives would go off, of course. We experienced 2 or 3 of those, and one was not sure when they were going to detonate,
Mm-hmm.
and they gave off this buzzing sound until the fuel was exhausted and they were ready to drop, and that was a signal for people to run to the air raid shelter and so
Mm-hmm.
on. Very, very sad. The English people suffered a lot.
Okay. Now, when you got home, did you join any veterans organizations?
Yes, I joined the American Legion.
Did you join the VFW at all?
No.
Okay. Did you stay in contact with anyone you were in service with?
Yes, I still write and correspond with a fellow who was a supply sergeant on the outfit that I was in. And he will celebrate his 99th birthday
Wow.
in July. So, and he was, then there was another gentleman that I met who was best man at our wedding in 1948.
Mm-hmm.
And we still keep in touch.
Okay. Did you attend any reunions at all?
No, we never, our group never got together.
Okay. How do you think
Sorry to say.
how do you think your time in the service changed or affected your life?
Well, in hindsight, I would say it was a rather valuable experience because I'm sure I matured from a young college graduate of 19 to an adult, and I could appreciate the fact that we have a great country and that we definitely need to defend it at any time that there's any sort of trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess I could say I grew up and was fortunate not to have any injuries or any wounds of any nature.
Okay. Now you have a map there that someone in your unit put together. You want to
Right.
hold that up and
Right.
explain it?
Well, this indicates the dotted line indicates our trip from the United States to England, and then from England across the English Channel for LSTs, landing in Le Havre, and then through Belgium and Holland, and eventually up to the Elbe River where we met the Germans. Then this dotted line indicates our trip back through the Rhine Valley to Munich, and that's where we were established most of the rest of the time.
Okay, that where you were pointing was France, but
Oh, yes.
Munich was up on the other end there, I believe.
Yeah, the unit here is we met the Russians on the Elbe River.
Okay. All right. And was the unit down in the right-hand corner there too?
Yes, this is the trip to Munich.
Munich is down there, okay.
Right.
All right. Got it. Now, you've also got a yearbook there, which you showed us the photo of the victims of the
Yes.
Holocaust victims. Now, there's some photos there of you. There was one photo you showed me where you were joking around with another fellow.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't.
Oh, that's all right.
Are you able to turn that?
Okay. That's you holding the knife down there. And
Right.
was that a training photo or?
Yes.
Okay. Got it?
Proof that we had to shoot game in order to have supplies.
That was a deer somebody shot?
Yes. Because the roads were crowded with those Germans who were evacuating from Denmark.
Okay. All right. Okay. And let me zoom right in on it. That's you with the corporal stripes?
Right. That's what I was at that time.
Okay. Got it. All right. And let me just get a shot of the cover of that
Sure.
book, just to get the unit insignia. Okay. All right. Thank you so much for your interview.
Well, you're welcome.